ICETE C22 in Turkey a few years back, there was a strong desire to see how we can further move the formal and non-formal sectors of theological education closer together and work together more. And in part because of that, we were asked to further explore global micro-credential standards and guidelines, which we have been working on for the last couple of years. And today is an important day because today we are going to have a session about micro credentials and non-formal theological education. And for today, this is going to be an important call for us to begin to the dialogue, the conversation about where we are within ICET about this topic and where we might be going here in the near term. And let me introduce to you then our primary guest today is Dr. Marvin Oxenham. Marvin serves as the Director for Quality Assurance with ICET, and he has been the one that has really been leading the charge, not just on micro credentials, but really all other things that have to do with global standards and guidelines for theological education. So, Marvin, thank you for all you've been doing, and welcome to our session today. And we look forward to what you have to say and the conversation we will have today. So Marvin will present for a little bit, and then we'll have a Mentimeter as he presents as well. So you can input data that way, and then we'll have a breakout rooms. Then come back with Marvin towards the end of the session. So Marvin, welcome again, and it's yours to take us to where we need to go this morning.
Good. Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everybody from Italy. Happy to lead you in this session. As Michael has said, this has been a slow train coming, but we think that, as I said, we've put together a proposal and a project that will really serve well as a sort of an ongoing further step in our dialogue around formal and non-formal. So before I start, just let me share for a minute with you. As Michael said, we're going to be using Mentimeter. And so if you would, if you have your phone perhaps with you, and you want to grab this, the code here. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so if you can, ideally, if you're on your computer, you can follow the Zoom conversation through your computer and then use your phone. There's going to be a few times that you can interact with the presentation. It'll also give you all of the data in the presentation that you can keep and access at a later time. And we'll also use the Mentimeter to collect questions. So it's important if you can grab this code. I'm going to move forward now, but I believe it's also been put in the chat. So we'll move on from here. Okay, so first of all, let me give you the name of the project. The project is called Vocational Micro-Credential Certification. And this doesn't come out of the blue. This is a part of very intentional strategic planning on the part of the ICET board. One of our main goals in our strategic plan is to advance quality in theological education. And one of the subpoints to that is to encourage quality in non-formal theological education and assisting its recognition. So this has been on the discussion of the ICET staff and board for a long time. And we believe that what we're presenting today is a significant step forward in achieving this particular aim in our own strategic plan to encourage the quality in non-formal theological education and assist its recognition. Let me say at the outset, we've often used the bridge metaphor about bridging the gap between formal and non-formal theological education. Might I say that is not the primary aim? The primary aim is not to bridge the gap. The primary aim is to advance quality in whatever sector and whatever kind of theological education we're doing, whether it's formal, non-formal, whether it's higher education, whether it's vocational, to advance quality in what we're doing. And that is a kingdom principle. That is something that we all strongly believe in. So as we advance quality, there's many secondary benefits. One of them is that the gap between the formal and the non-formal can be bridged. So this is an additional benefit to our primary objective, which is to advance quality. And hopefully this project that I'm presenting to you today will advance quality and as a byproduct will also assist in bridging the gap. As we advance quality, there are some things that we've really held on to as very important. And so before I present the project, just so you know, these are things that are important for us in ICETE in thinking this through. We want to keep formal and non-formal distinct. They're not the same thing, and we want to keep them distinct with their strong points and their unique distinctives. We also want to keep tertiary higher education and vocational non-tertiary education distinct. Now, I'm already introducing some technical terms, and I apologize if some of these may not be immediately familiar to everyone. I'm not going to dig into them too much, but there will be space and time to gain a better information. There is a difference between tertiary higher education and non-tertiary vocational education in the secular realm, and we also want to keep that distinction very clear and distinct. We do not, at the same time, want to alter the nature of non-formal. We don't want the non-formal to become higher education, tertiary education. It is different. And we don't want to overburden the non-formal with compliance processes. This has often happened with tertiary higher education in theological education. The accreditation processes are quite complex, and we don't want to burden the non-formal, which often are lighter, more agile organizations. We don't want to overburden with compliance processes. Fourthly, we want to design strategies that somehow are in line with the broader secular educational landscape. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to align as much as possible what we're doing in the sector and the discipline of theological education with what's happening broadly in the educational landscape around the world. Now, that is difficult because the world is a big place and this educational landscape does not speak with one voice, but we do try to listen to that and align as much as we can. Sixth, we're keeping in mind this new phenomena of micro-credentials, and we want to very much take advantage of the potential of micro-credentials. And seven, we want to identify realistic and representative strategies for recognition and portability. So our strategies, it's no use dreaming to reach the moon when we've only got other things that we can do. So we want to be realistic, and we want to find the areas that are most representative in the strategies that we are putting together. So the goal, and may I remind you that in the Mentimeter, the question Q&A function remains open across all the slides. So if at any time I'm saying something you don't understand or you want to ask a question, feel free to do so at any time. We'll take all of the questions at the end, before the end of our time together today. But do feel free to use that at any point. So the goal of this entire process is to maintain the nature and level of current non-formal learning experiences, but allowing them greater recognition as formal micro-credentials. So that, in a nutshell, in 4 lines, is a very sort of large, quite elaborate project. But in a nutshell, that is the goal of what we're trying to achieve. So here it is even in further detail, and then I'm going to unpack each one of these items a little bit more to help you understand. So the ICETE Vocational Micro-Credential Certification is a process that basically does 4 things. It starts with non-formal, post-secondary, non-tertiary, vocational learning experiences. That's a mouthful. Those are technical terms, but we need to use them to be able to place this kind of learning experience within a framework. And within the framework that we now have as ICETE, the ICETE qualification framework, you find it referenced there as IQF. This is IQF level 4. And this matches very much what is happening in broader secular education as well. Non-formal, post-secondary, non-tertiary, adult vocational learning experience. So that's a starting point. So we take those We put them through a quality assurance process that is fit for purpose, and I'll explain better what that process is in a minute. Through that process, these learning experiences can be transformed into a formal, non-tertiary, vocational micro-credential qualification. And again, I know that's a mouthful, but we need to have some of these technical foundations to be able to understand exactly what is happening. And again, there will be time to clarify this. Through this transformation, we will then enhance certification, quality recognition, and portability, which is the aim to be able to give the non-formal this greater enhanced level of recognition and portability, which means simply that students can take their learning experience and they can take it places where there are greater chances that it will be recognized. I put this into Notebook LM, and I asked, could you produce an infographic for me? This is what came out, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's not that bad. If you've not used Notebook LM, here's a little plug. Play with it, but don't rely on it too heavily. The interesting part of this graph is sort of the bottom part where you see those four boxes. And if you followed at all, some of the documents we've produced as ICETE, in particular, the guidelines on formal, non-formal theological education, we actually developed this four-bucket model that organizes learning, a sort of a taxonomy of learning. And in particular, this particular project is looking at the bottom half of that for that quadrilateral with bucket 2 and bucket 4. And bucket 4 is non-formal, non-tertiary learning. That is where a lot of the non-formal education is happening in the sector of theology. It's non-formal and it is non-tertiary. What we're trying to do with this certification process into vocational micro-credentials is to move from bucket 4 into bucket 2. Bucket 2, where you see it remains non-tertiary, the level remains the same. So basically, what you're doing as a non-formal entity is not changed, but it moves it through a process into the formal, where we can then call it a micro-credential. And in a sense, that is then the bridge that allows the transition and unlocks options of recognition and portability. So again, I'll leave that with you. You can play around with it, try to understand better what it says. There's a lot on that particular infographic. So let me move now to actually just unpacking for you the three words in our definition, which is vocational micro-credential certification. So let me start with the word vocational. And it's important to say at the outset that we are looking at education that is non-tertiary higher education. We need to keep that distinction very clear. We are not talking about here about higher education levels. We're not talking about bachelor level. We're not talking about master level, about doctoral level, or even diploma, sometimes certificate level. Those are tertiary higher education levels. We are talking about adult education at a level that is not tertiary. Okay. This corresponds, and in many of your countries, you may have corresponding kinds of adult education that may be called VET, vocational educational training. Some countries call it TVET, technical vocational educational training. In some countries, it's called skill training. Others, it's occupational training. But this is the kind of training where in many countries, you can train, for example, to do some nursing abilities or maybe some administration roles, or sometimes even in the skills and the vocations of carpentry or electrician. There are these adult vocational training programs. And in a sense, this is the correspondence that we're looking at in the discipline of theological education and ministry training. So the focus is on the vocation. And as I've written in that little article that you may have read that just came out with a newsletter earlier this week, thank you, Julie, for that, by the way. The word vox, it comes from vocation, which was a Christian word originally, and it meant the calling of God. And so vocational training, the focus is on equipping for ministry. And let me say, as I said in the small article in the newsletter, this includes all learning domains. This doesn't mean that vocational education has no academic component, that there's no level of engagement with knowledge and cognitive skills, but the emphasis is on equipping for ministry, on being able to use theology, being able to know the Bible, and to apply it to different ministry contexts. And that is what vocational training does for adults. It's not the higher education, it is that level, that kind of training. And this is what is described in the ICETE qualification framework level 4. You see the little image there in the drawing. You see that circle. If you've looked at the ICETE qualification framework, you'll recognize it. If you've not looked at it, you should, because or else you're not going to understand some of the things I'm saying here. The ICETE qualification framework is a fundamental component for what we're trying to put together here. And as you can see, it is the orange area. It's the orange area that's called non-tertiary vocational educational training. The blue area in the bottom circle, that's higher education, and that's the higher levels. We're looking here at the level 4 IQF vocational training. And from our observation, and here we're looking especially to those of you that are in the non-formal training ministry, we believe from our observation that a lot of what is happening in the non-formal education sector in theological education is at level 4. You're giving basic fundamental training. You're equipping for ministry. You're equipping pastors. You're equipping church planters. You're equipping people to have campus ministries at a very basic, fundamental level to be able to enable them to serve the kingdom. That is why we've identified this particular level as what we feel may be
I'm
relevant.
on a video call here. There's an important update on theological education.
Okay, somebody's got their microphone on. If you have a question, can you just wait or put it in the chat, in the Q and answer, and we'll come to the questions at the end. Okay, so the second word in vocational micro-credential certification is micro-credential, and we're becoming more and more familiar with this particular word. These are short learning opportunities, they're focus courses, they're intensive seminars, or they're modular packages that are built into larger schemes. Our observation again is that this describes a lot of what is happening in the non-formal. You are rarely offering full 1 or 2 year full-time programs in the non-formal. You're offering short learning opportunities and putting them together in different ways and different packages. And this is exactly what micro-credentials do. But micro-credentials are formal qualifications in the IQF framework. Therefore, to bring what you're doing into the micro-credential world will give you a way to formally credentialize the learning and give it greater recognition and portability for your students. Thirdly, the third word here is vocational micro-credential certification. And let me say very clearly, this is not accreditation. Accreditation is what our member associations are doing across the world in the different regions. There are separate processes in place. They are very different. They are much more robust. They have a completely different focus, a different scope. Even in micro-credentials, higher education micro-credentials are a completely different thing. They will go through different quality assurance processes, and our regional associations are preparing to do this. So let me make that line very clear. We are not talking about accreditation. We are not talking about tertiary higher education. What we are talking about is a certification process. This is a quality assurance review that transforms the non-formal learning into a formal vocational qualification at level 4. And obviously you want to know, well, what exactly does it entail? I'll come to that in just a minute. What it does, it leads to formal ICETE certification. And let me also just make a note here, it's written there that initially in phase 1, as we roll this out, ICETE will be doing a lot of this directly. But as we move forward, we're also looking to our member associations who may participate in this certification as well of the vocational micro-credentials. So that's to say that we work very closely with our member associations. But initially, ICETE will sort of be launching this to then seek further cooperation as we move forward. So now we come to the question, and this is the last little bit of my slides, and then I have a quiz to see if you've been listening or if I've been communicating, and let's see how well we've done, okay? So this question, short quiz, and then you'll be into your breakout rooms to be able to populate our question and answer section. So how exactly does it work? First of all, there are eligibility criteria. Who could actually engage and apply for the vocational micro-credential certification process? Two main criteria. The first is some sort of affiliation with ICETE. So you're either an affiliate, an associate, you're a member association. There's different forms of affiliation with ICETE. So this is a service offered to the ICETE constituency. And the second is that you are engaged in some form of non-tertiary training. As I've said several times, this is for IQF level 4. It is not for other levels. So you need to ensure that the training that you're doing is actually at the level that the service is aimed at. And you may be unsure. You're saying, well, I really don't know what IQF level 4 is. I'm not sure if our training is at that level. We're developing a tool, and it'll soon be launched, and we'll share the link with you. That'll actually help you assess the level of your learning and to see if you're actually at level 4 or where you're at. Okay, so but those are the two criteria: affiliation with ICETE and engagement with non-tertiary learning. The procedures are very simple, and again, we've tried to keep this robust, reflecting what is happening in the vocational sector in the secular, but not falling into the compliance world of accreditation, which can be very burdensome, especially for non-formal providers. So there's basically 7 steps in the procedures. There's an eligibility and application phase. Then there's induction. And this is actually a face-to-face meeting where we bring together applicants and we not only train you further in what this means, but the induction also serves to actually do some of the things that you pretty much walk away from the 3-day induction and you're done. And you're ready to submit and to be certified. So we're trying to put it all together to walk you through it, to help you do it, to obtain your certification within 2 or 3 days of work together. So that's the induction. So for example, point number 3, the production and publication of a self-audit, which is the main mechanism. We will do that together during the induction. We will help you understand what a self-audit is, how to write one. We will actually lead you in writing it. And then it will be published both on your website and our own website as a measure of transparency, which is part of the quality assurance process. We then ask you to use some standard templates for vocational micro-credentials. We've designed these. We'll be introducing them. Some of you have already seen some of these, but that will be part of the procedures. And then there's annual reporting where you will be reporting to ICETE on what you're doing, on the micro-credentials that you've been producing and launching and how they're going. There will be fees, both the review and annual fees. And may I say that in this first year, we do have some funds available to help those of you that may perhaps wonder, can we afford this? A, it will not be expensive, but B, we do have some funds available, at least for a first year, perhaps 2, to be able to help some of you get this going. And then every 5 years, there's a renewal. There's a renewal of the procedure just to ensure that everything is still in line and that you've not changed radically since your first review procedure. What are the outcomes? So the outcomes are the twofold. The first, that you will be listed as a vocational micro-credential provider in the ICETE directory. The ICETE website will publish a directory of all providers that have gone through this process and are certified to be able to offer ICETE vocational micro-credentials. Just a note here, this is institutional certification. It does not require that every single micro-credential goes through a review process. You are reviewed as an institution, as a provider, and then you can roll out micro-credentials as you see fit. And second outcome is that you are authorized, as I've said several times, to actually use the label ICETE vocational micro-credential on your qualification. And we'll be providing branding and all of the rest of that to enhance the recognizability of the micro-credential that you are producing. So that's the end of my presentation, and I think I'm just a couple of minutes over time, but let us take the brief test. So starting with question one, and it's very easy. There's, I think, 7 questions, and they're true, false. So the first question is, the main purpose of vocational micro-credential certification is to bridge the formal, non-formal gap. And I can see that those of you that are responding have responded correctly. This is false. It is not the main purpose. The main purpose is to advance quality. The secondary purpose is hopefully it will also bridge the gap. Second question. Vocational micro-credential certification will deeply change the nature of non-formal education. Is that true or false? Oh, well done. I've either communicated well or you've listened very well, because this is false. The main point here is that we do not want to deeply change the nature of what some of your organizations have developed over years of good practice. You have developed some excellent approaches to education, and this certification process in no way does it want to change that. Third question, vocational micro-credential certification only applies to non-tertiary IQF level 4 training. And again, the majority so far have responded correctly. It is true. For the 2 of you that have, well, 3 have responded false. Sad to say, it is true. This is only for non-tertiary IQF level 4 training, which in due time we will try to explain better what exactly that is. Finally, no, not finally, I got another 2 or 3. Vocational micro-credential certification guarantees recognition of credit in formal higher education. Very good. This is false. It does not guarantee recognition of credit. It enhances the recognition. It gives the possibility for formal higher education programs to recognize this learning and potentially to give credit in higher education programs. This does happen in the secular. Vocational educational training often is considered by universities and given credit either for optional optional courses or even recognition of prior learning, but it is not automatic. It always depends on the receiving institution on whether credit is received. But this process makes it much easier and more likely. VMC certification is only for training that has no academic content. Yes, and again, you are clustering correctly around the false. Vocational education does have academic content. It does have cognitive learning skills. It does have knowledge and understanding as a part of it. It is not the main emphasis. The main emphasis is the skills, is the ministry training, but it does also feature academic content. You need to read the IQF level 4 descriptors to see if your training qualifies for VMC. Yes, so there's the answer is true. So you may have a little bit of homework to do to go and actually read those descriptors, and we will be providing a tool, as I've said, to help you self-assess where you're actually at. VMC certification is the same as accreditation? False. Yes, well done. You're very quick on that. It is a completely different process, and we don't want to confuse this with the accreditation work that our member associations are doing. And this is the final question. VMC certification can be achieved within a few months. You're not quite as quick here. Okay. The answer is true. From the application process, once you attend an induction, it can take only a few months for you to be able to achieve this certification process. So the answer in this case is True. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and I'll turn it back to Julie. I believe will be putting us into the breakout rooms. And you have about 10 minutes in the breakout rooms to ask questions. That you can continue using the Mentimeter to ask questions. And we will come back in about 10 minutes into the plenary and I'll try to answer the questions. Well, okay. Is it me?
Yes, go for it.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay. Well, I cheated a little bit. You may have seen me drop in and out of your chats. So I heard some of the questions, and I also heard that some of the moderators were already responding. So that's great. So let me give it a go here. I see we've got about 21 questions. So in 10 minutes. So that's obviously not going to be an exhaustive answer to all of them, but we'll start, and then obviously we'll have a lot more communication happening on this. Today is the launch, and in a sense, if you come away with more questions than answers, that's good. We've got plenty of answers. Some we're still developing ourselves. So, and you're part of the process. So thank you very much. So first of all, will these slides be available for downloading? Yes. They'll be circulated if you've had them on your phone, but certainly we'll make a PDF and download the slides. Okay. Oops. Okay. I think the previous one was just great point on not overburdening the non-formal. So thank you. Yeah, that's a key point. Can you please state the goal again? Yes, the goal is to take non-formal, non-tertiary vocational training and through a certification process to transform it into a vocational formal micro-credential. And again, it's a technical mouthful, but that is the goal. Next question. Is this mandatory? No, it is not mandatory. This is, if you're affiliated with ICETE in any way, this is a service that ICETE is making available, and you can pick it up or not. So you can say this is interesting, but we're not ready, and maybe in 2 or 3 years you will be. So no, there's absolutely nothing mandatory about this process. It is problematic when we use the phrase leads to formal ICETE certification, and formal is used in multiple ways. Okay, I'm not sure I get the question, but you may want to refer again to the document we published last year on guidelines to formal and non-formal education, and the distinction that is actually made. What is it that makes learning non-formal or formal? We are using formal in a very specific way, and we've defined that. We've tried to align it with the educational sector, and so that question may need further digging into the actual definition, because the way that we're using it is not problematic. It's straightforward, it's linear, it's coherent with our definitions. How do we ensure that NFTE, UCRED, QA don't lead to us into submitting more easily measurable metrics for our desired training outcomes, often harder to measure to avoid teaching to the test? I think this question, it's similar. There's other questions, at least I heard 1 or 2 in the rooms that are similar to this. Let me make this very clear. What this certification process does not have, it does not have external compliance standards that you will be required to meet. That is accreditation. Accreditation is having external compliance standards where you are told to be a higher education program, you need to do this, that, and the other. This certification process has none of those. We will not be publishing standards for vocational micro-credentials. At the core of the process is the self-audit. And the self-audit is not singing off someone else's song sheet. It's not saying, oh, here how we comply with these 10 standards that have been given to us. No, a self-audit is just that. It's a self-audit. And it is actually, the self-audit will be based on an improvement cycle reflection. It's called the Deming cycle. You may know that. Or it's also the plan, do, check, act cycle, where we will ask you to walk yourself through and, in a sense, to take a selfie of what you're doing, to tell us how you're planning, to tell us how you're doing what you're planning, to tell us and the world, because this will be published, how you check on whether what you planned and doing is actually working, and then how you're going to improve it. And so you put yourself on this improvement cycle. So that is the core of the mechanism. And that's going to take some adjustment in our thinking because we're used to thinking accreditation think, where there's external standards and we need to demonstrate compliance. No, this recognizes the huge diversity that there is in the non-formal, and we're not asking you to comply with anything. The certification will ask you to tell the world in an articulated, reflective way what you're doing. And then, of course, the world will decide. The student, in particular, will be able to read your self-audit and say, oh, this is the kind of organization. This is what they do. That's original. No one else is doing that. Or they don't do this. They do this very well. But it's an act of transparency. That is an act of quality assurance and responsibility. There seemed to be changes over the last few months. It first seemed that the process would be different between accrediting agencies. Now it seems that it may be the same. Which is it? Okay, there may be confusion here between the actual accreditation of higher education micro-credentials. That is a separate process that is ongoing, and our agencies are preparing to do that within the next year or so. All of our agencies in ICETE will be accrediting higher education micro-credentials. This is a different project. This is vocational micro-credentials, where ICETE will be sharing in a more global way with our agencies the process. So they're two very distinct, and that is something that we're actually quite concerned there would be confusion. So we're going to bend over backwards in our communication and our marketing to make this distinction very clear. There will be, in the world of theological education, hopefully, two kinds of micro-credentials: accredited higher education micro-credentials and certified vocational micro-credentials. Is there a difference in this process? I'm not sure how I can back up here. I think, okay, I'm sorry, that question's gone. Does this apply only to face-to-face situations, or does it apply to online only? This has nothing to do with delivery. So yes, vocational micro-credentials can be delivered in any way. Online, face-to-face, seminar, portfolio-based, situational learning, anything that is fit for purpose in your context is fit to be a vocational micro-credential. What is the outcome of this process? Are these micro-credentials stackable in higher education since it is not an official accreditation? Again, that was the answer to one of the questions in the final test. They are stackable. They can be recognized. They're much easier to be recognized for credit in higher education, but there's no guarantee. It will depend on the receiving institution. It will depend on the recognition of prior learning processes, which most higher education institutions have in place. But sometimes with non-formal, it's very difficult. This will make it easier. It will make it more recognizable. It will help the higher education institutions recognize the learning that has taken place and potentially to be able to consider it to be stacked into fuller qualifications. How can church internships be broken up into something that could be micro-credentialed? Well, yes, absolutely. This could happen. So a church internship, which is a very practical, focused learning experience, that needs to be packaged in a way, and we will provide you templates and tools to help you do that. But absolutely, church internships, so even very practice-based learning experiences, obviously there would need to be, we would suggest some sort of assessment. How do you actually know that the learning and the growth has taken place? But that would be part of your self-audit process. How can we ensure quality of learning and teaching in the classroom with vocational micro-credentials? How can we ensure the credentials of the teacher? We can't. The language of ensuring is a language of accreditation. The language of certification is a language of transparency and simply saying what there is. So in the self-audit, clearly we will ask the provider, as part of the self-audit, to describe what are the qualifications of your moderators, of your teachers, of your tutors. How do you ensure that good teaching has taken place? How do you evaluate that? What do you do if something is not going well? How do you fix that? But that is part of the self-audit. It's not a language of ensuring. So in a sense, this needs to be very clear. ICETE will not ensure the quality. It will simply give a mechanism to give transparency to what is actually happening. What are the assessment methods to evaluate the methods and to know that they're relevant in real world settings? Again, ICETE will not publish assessment methods. We will ask you, what are your assessment methods in the planning? Well, how do you plan assessment? And how do you evaluate whether the assessment, for example, is contextualized? That is something that we certainly will ask in the self-audit report, questions on contextualization, especially if you're an international global ministry. In your planning, in your doing, in your acting, in your evaluating, how is relevance to your setting ensured and guaranteed? And then we will ask you to write about that and transparently let everybody know. The potential for certification for those informal programs is possible through this to determine if someone has the needed vocational aspects after graduation. Again, that's part of your self-audit. You will say in your programs, what have you put in place to give guarantees or ensure in some way that these aspects in your graduates are actually there? How do you know? Do you have some sort of evaluation tool? And if you're not achieving your purpose, how are you going to change that? How are you going to improve? So again, this has to do very much with what is called in education, with the developing reflective practitioners and being transparent about that to our stakeholders. Part one, as an institutional certification, does that mean all trainers' training must originate from that organization, or can they bring in guest trainees or invite other like-minded, like-hearted? Again, we're not going to tell you. ICETE has no standard about this particular question. We will ask you in your self-audit to describe what you're doing. How do you do this? And why do you do it? Why do you think that the best way for your students' experience is, for example, to bring in guest trainees or to invite other like-minded, like-hearted? Why, or perhaps you just have a staff of full-time 5 people and that's a closed staff. You do it that way. Why do you think that's the best way? In your self-audit, you would make that transparent, but we will not evaluate that. Courses to be offered under the part of their program or under their umbrella. Again, this is completely up to you. In your self-audit, you will tell what you are offering and what your umbrella looks like. We will not be selling umbrellas. Will the fee include per student fees? We have not yet outlined a fee schedule. That will be part of the ICETE board to determine. As you can appreciate, this is very much fresh paint. And there's still parts of the fence that we've not gotten to painting. Fees is one of them, but whatever fees there are, they will be fit for purpose and clearly in line with the sector that we know that we're working with. How can a seminary set up a program that is non-tertiary? How does it relate to their formal programs? Are there stages to build up and connect the VMC to the formal? If not, well, that's a great question. This is open to formal programs as well. A seminary could set up a VMC department where they would clearly offer vocational micro-credentials. They would go through a separate certification process, but by no means is this something that they could not access. So very much, yes, a conversation to be had. What are the minimum quality assurance elements that must be demonstrably present? Again, it's the same question. We don't have the minimum elements. We simply ask you to tell us what you're doing and to tell the world about it. How would the micro-credentials compare to an outcome-based acknowledgement such as Reforma? This kind of program can very well fit into this credentialization because we are not telling anyone what to do. And if Reforma has a system that they have devised that is working well, that is outcomes-based, in their self-audit, they would describe that. And then they would package that into micro-credentials. And so this would entirely be within the very broad scope of what these vocational micro-credentials might embrace. Will the ICETE VMC process allow for retrospective recognition? If so, what would that entail? Wow, we've not thought about this yet. Maybe yes, but we need to think about this a little more carefully. Don't want to make promises without having thought it through. Will this certification receive any government recognition, particularly for registration of churches? It could. It depends on the government. Clearly, if you can demonstrate that your training has gone through an external assessment process and that is transparent and published, that could very well, for some governments, sort of move you out of the suspicion zone of being some sort of a mill. to being an educational institution that's transparent, that is offering product that is well thought through. How do we avoid being driven by measurables? I think that's similar to a question we had before. Could you please remind us how we become certified micro-credential providers? That will be in the slides. There's the procedures that are there. We are now working on the full document. It will be called Guidelines for Vocational Micro-Credential Providers. That document is being written as we speak. So it is not produced yet. You may be looking for it on the website. It's not there because it's part of the fence that we've not painted yet. But hopefully within the next month or so, that document will be available. We'll circulate it. We may have another meeting to present it to you. What is the difference between IQF 5 and IQF 6? Okay, that is a technical question. Whoever asked that, write to me in private and we can engage with that. You need to look at the descriptors that there are in the IQF to see the distinction between those. But IQF 10.5 already is higher education. It is no longer non-tertiary, it is tertiary. We work with TVET in Kenya. Will ICETE interact with government agencies to be recognized as a qualification certifier? Certainly, if this develops and the doors open for that, I think ICETE would be very much willing to do that. We've engaged with conversations with the INQAHI at a global level for the accreditation of ICETE and our member associations. We'd be very happy to consider this opportunity as well. What percentage of ICETE members provide non-formal? I'll leave that to Michael and Julie. I'm not sure about the numbers, but I think a solid percentage. Will the MC induction be done by ICETE or by the regional groups? In this first stage, it will be done by ICETE. The first induction we are planning for this October, and I will be happy to welcome those that will be participating to Rome. So we hope to have a face-to-face first induction meeting in October in Rome, and we'll give you more information of that as we move forward. How flexible is the framework for contexts where many institutions operate outside formal governmental recognition structures, as is common in Latin America? It is extremely flexible, as I've said many times. You need to make this fitting for your context. And part of the self-audit is questions around this. Why is this way that you are doing education suitable for your context, for your national context, or your regional context, as in the case of Latin America? And I've gotten to final question. Stop asking questions because we've run out of time. Well, will these slides be available? Yes, they will be. Okay, so final slide, next steps. And I've got a minute and then I'll pass it back to Julie. We have a form that we've prepared to you as a follow-up for this particular meeting. It is a declaration of interest and follow-up form. If Julie is now putting that into the chat, if you would copy that link, and if you'd be so kind to fill out that form, even today at the end of the meeting, it will only take 5 minutes to fill out. That will immediately give us a list of emails of people that also the level of your interest. There's quite a bit of information in the form itself. So as an immediate follow-up, we would ask you to complete that form so we can continue the conversation with those that are particularly keen about this. Second step is on the 6th of March, there is going to be a follow-up Zoom call. So it won't be a big ICETE virtual meeting organized and planned and advertised. Copy the link. That is my personal Zoom call. And at 14 CET on the 6th of March, I will open the call, and whoever is there, it will be much more informal. We'll be talking to each other. You can ask about your own specific situation. In the form, there's a place for you to say that you'd like to participate in that, but we will not advertise that. So grab that link now, or else forever hold your peace. But you can always contact us by email, and we'll be happy to follow up. We plan to open applications in spring of 2026, and as I said, our first induction alpha will be in October 2026 in Rome. And in the form, the declaration of interest form, we are also already asking you, would you be interested potentially in participating in the first induction? And that will start giving us a participant list for that. Okay, I'm going to stop, turn it back to Julie. Apologies, we've gone a few minutes over, but you asked too many questions. Good questions.
Thank you so much, Marvin, for all the careful care you took to answer those questions and to explain this very complicated but important new aspect of what ICETE is moving into. So just a few things for you as we close up. If you are on our mailing list, you should have received this week announcement that C27 will be held in Mombasa, Kenya. That the dates for that are 5 to 9 April 2027. And we will more information will be coming out in the coming days regarding how we're going to do registration. It will not be an open registration this time. We'll be doing some nominations. So just be on the lookout for more information about that and how to be a part of it. And then the final thing is that we will see you again next month on March 20th for our next ICETE virtual. So thank you all for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your day or evening, whatever it may be. God bless you.